when I worked in tech support, we would come across funny usernames where you could tell someone who made it was just having fun. And we were doing, it was an auto body business, and the username was Speed Lube. And that was the name of the business, and the person had a fucking laugh making that username.
They're like, hee hee hee.
Hi, welcome to Speed Lube. How may I service you? If you know what I mean.
Wink.
We'll get you in and out in 2 minutes or less.
Yes. Although that's not something to brag about. Just saying.
It is if you have plans that day and other things to do.
That's true. You got to get on your way.
Welcome to Spoilerpiece Theater, the podcast that doesn't give a shit about spoilers. We just want to talk about the movies. My name is Dave Riedel. I write for Salt Lake City Weekly and Orlando Weekly, and I'm a member of the Boston Online Film Critics Association, even though my work does not appear in the city of Boston. But that, whatever.
But you live in the Boston
I live in the
vicinity,
Boston area.
So there we go. My name is Megan Kearns. I'm a freelance writer and film critic, editor for Bitchflix, and also a member of the Boston Online Film Critics Association.
My name is Evan Crean. I am editor for The Independent. I am co-chair of BOFCA and co-author of your 80s movie guide to better living.
All right.
That book is on my shelf.
Is it?
It
Yeah.
sure is.
Yeah.
My movie collection.
That book that I have read is on my shelf.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh.
So anyway, this week there's a whole heap and helping of movies.
Mm-hmm.
A bumper crop, if you will.
A smorgasbord.
A smorgasbord. A cornucopia of film. I'm
hungry.
Yeah. I am kind of hungry. So first we have The Irishman.
Mm-hmm.
Or The Irishman. I wish it were called The Irishman.
Glenn Irishman. A callback to our Glenn Spiderman conversation.
The Good Liar, Charlie's Angels, and then we got a bunch of movies about the Jews because it's the Boston Jewish Film Festival.
It is.
And so we have Golda's Balcony.
Yes.
Is that like Gold in My Ear? Or?
Yes.
Oh, it is.
Gold in My Ear.
Oh, hey.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, how many people are named Golda? I don't know. So
I
that's
don't know.
the most famous one that I can think
Yes.
of. So Golda's Balcony, Flawless, and My Polish Honeymoon.
Yes.
So anyway, I really want to talk about My Polish Honeymoon, but
It's really good.
yeah. Well,
Yeah.
Why don't we start with The Good Liar? Because I believe you saw that on your own, did you not?
I sure did.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So let's hear about it.
All right.
Get to the point.
No pressure.
No pressure.
Yeah. So, The Good Liar, the best thing I can say about it is Helen Mirren and Ian McKellen are in it.
Oh, right. I
Yes.
forgot which movie this was.
Yes.
This is the one where they're old.
Yeah.
And,
They are old. That is correct.
And one of them is like a spy person or a thief kind of person or something.
Con man?
Yes.
Con man.
So Ian McKellen is a con man, and he sets up a dating profile right off the bat. That's what we see him doing. He's setting up an online dating profile, and he's going on a date with Helen Mirren, and she's the unsuspecting older wealthy woman he's trying to con out of her millions. And for a film about a con artist, for a film about and I should say the film is not really just about con artistry and deception
The artistry
and
of
lies.
the con.
The artistry of the con. That is what it starts off being, and that's where it seems like where it's going, although it's very, very clear pretty early on that there's going to be a big twist. Very obvious. There are more twists that come as the film goes on that are less obvious.
The conner becomes the connie.
No, maybe. Perhaps. But yeah, so for a film that's about a con, I expect a very smart film. I expect a very well-written film, very sharp film. This is not that. It's fine. The film is fine. But Helen Mirren and Ian McKellen are so good that I don't want to say it doesn't matter because 100% matters, but they're just so damn good and enjoyable to watch. And I just love them bantering that I'm like, I don't even care that the movie's not that great or that well written. I just like watching these two titans of acting
in a movie together.
And I want to see them do more together because with actual better material. Yes, Dave.
No, I was going to ask, do they play limeys in this movie, or are they like not English?
No, they're British.
Okay.
Well, okay, so we're gonna just spoil this right out of the gate.
Do it.
So because there's no way to talk about this movie without spoiling the shit out of it. So they are British, but surprise. Well, first of all, you see it coming a mile away that Helen Mirren is not so innocent and not, so gullible and unsuspecting.
Well, you don't get millions just by inheriting it all from your parents,
right?
Or maybe you
do.
And
it's interesting. She keeps casually dropping that she's like, oh, I paid for my house in cash, and oh, I just bought this new car in cash. Like, it's very obvious, and it's very obvious where the film is going. And when Ian McKellen does his big con where he has to convince her to get a joint account together to like do some investments or something, it doesn't even matter. He leaves, and then he needs to come back because he's forgotten this keypad, and this keypad is like really pivotal to the plot, where that's how you input your passcode, that's how you access this private account, and blah blah blah. And so he goes back to the house, and the house that she's living at, where her grandson sometimes stays because he's in grad school, and oh, lo and behold, nobody's there. It's an empty house.
Oh, sad trombone.
So yes, the Connie has become the Connor, and so she's sitting there in the dark, and in the film that's
having
all about
a glass of prosecco.
I hope so. Prosecco's good.
Smoking a Camel Straight.
But yeah, so the film that starts off being about conning and is about a lot, for a good part of it, then shifts and becomes about identity. And I guess actually it was about identity before, because you find out that Ian McKellen is not really British, and he's actually German, and he stole someone's identity, and her grandson accuses him of being a Nazi, and he's like, no, I'm not a Nazi.
I'm not just a scumbag. Nazi.
Just a regular scumbag.
Right, I'm just a regular scumbag. So then when Helen Mirren is sitting in the dark and is confronting him, and she's like, I'm going to deduct like $50,000 or 50,000 pounds rather every time you lie, and he's like, I don't know what you're talking about, and she's like, delete, and it's like this, she's great in this scene because she's just great in everything. And then you find out the film shifts again, and more twists. It's real. She knew him when they were kids, but he doesn't remember her because she had a crush on him, and he was her translator, and he raped her. And
what?
Yeah, so it becomes this rape revenge film where she wants to con him out of all his money because he raped her, and because of that incident, he also turned in her father for being a traitor in Was it in Poland? No. Was it in Poland or Germany? It was Germany. God, I'm getting my countries confused. So he turns in her father, and then her father dies, and then her mother commits suicide, and then her sisters die in a bombing. So she's getting back at him for like all this shit.
Yeah.
And
that's a long burn, man. This is a slow burn.
That is a long con.
I mean, why don't you just why don't you just like buy a Louisville Slugger and like bash him in the knees and be like, motherfucker, and then curb stomp him.
I'm going to wait for him to get old. Then I'm going to con him out of all of his money, and then I'm going to dance on his grave.
So the movie does bring up that point, and because she's like, oh, because you were doing all these cons to unsuspecting older women, you
amassed this great fortune that I had to have.
Well, he made himself notable. Like, he popped up in the news or something, and her grandson found him. So and it was like a few years prior. So that's when he started, like, her grandson was like researching him and following him. Yeah. And then she didn't want him, because he says, why didn't you just come right out? Like, why all this elaborate ruse, essentially? And she's like, well, I don't even care about you anymore. She's like, I've moved past you. And like, clearly she has not, because she needs to get revenge. So clearly she hasn't moved past. But anyway, so it's just, there's something in this, the Me Too era of rampant misogyny and rapists and abusers getting away with shit, there is something very satisfying seeing this guy get the shaft.
Yeah.
But the film goes on way too long. Like, even like the film should have just really ended right there. It didn't. It keeps going. There's like a struggle, and like they're like she stabs him. He's trying to strangle her. Like it's a thing.
Kind of feels like Charlie's Angels in that way.
We'll get to that.
Yeah, we'll get to it.
Yeah. And then there's like, and then you find out he gets, and then you find out he had a stroke because he got beaten up, and like it's just, and then you see her at her house, and like the movie goes on too long. The movie is too long. The movie needs to be better written and better directed and edited. But I'm here for a rape revenge film. Even if it's not a straight, horror subgenre rape revenge film. But yeah, and it was kind of satisfying to see him get his comeuppance.
Yeah.
But yeah, so there's lots of twists, and I spoiled them all, and there we go. But
Well,
yeah.
I won't be seeing that mostly because I didn't want to see a movie starring two olds. I'm sorry. Just kidding. I would have watched
Dave,
it.
that's so ageist.
I know. As somebody who is, hurtling past middle age, I kind of think to myself, I should maybe watch movies that have more olds in them, but nah. So
That have more old.
yeah, the olds.
But yeah, so it was disappointing, but they were great in it.
Okay.
Great acting.
All right, well, let's move on to something a little better, like the Boston Jewish Film Festival. You guys have seen these three movies that we mentioned earlier. You both have seen them?
I saw two of them.
Oh,
Yes.
Golda's Balcony, Flawless, and My Polish Honeymoon.
Yes.
You could have many, many sequels to this. Just My German Honeymoon, My Canadian Honeymoon.
Right.
And My Seychelles Honeymoon.
Could be a whole franchise.
It'll be a spin-off series from the Trip movies. The Michael Winterbottom, Steve Coogan, and what's his name?
Rob Brydon.
Rob Brydon, Steve Coogan.
Yeah.
Where they're just eating their way around the world.
Yeah, doing their Sean Connery impressions.
All right.
And Michael Caine.
Well, let's talk about Golda's Balcony.
Yeah.
'Cause that's the one that you saw that Megan didn't see.
I'll
right?
talk about that
Correct.
briefly. It's Golda's Balcony, the film, is a recorded and edited stage production, actually from 2003, I believe, or 2002. It was Tovah Feldshuh was starring in the show, the one-woman show Golda's Balcony, and it's just an edited, recorded version of her performance, and that's really the main thing. It's just incredible. It's an incredible stage performance about Golda Meir and her life. It starts with her as an old woman recounting her stories, kind of like in... she tells the audience that she's dying and kind of flashes back to a pivotal moment in 1972 where she was under wartime circumstances trying to decide whether to use nuclear weapons. That, I think, is when the show is most compelling, dealing with that struggle and the decision whether or not to use nuclear force. But the whole thing... it really just hinges on Tovah Feldshuh's performance, which is just, it's incredible.
Well, she's kind of a powerhouse,
Oh,
right?
she's always amazing.
She is, and she's always really good in everything, but like you really see it when it's a one-person show, and she's jumping between characters so seamlessly to the point where like, how does a single person keep all this stuff in their head? It just seems miraculous to me that one person could remember all of the dialogue, all of the voices and the characters, and like make it all come together in a way that she does. So I think it was really great that they put this together, and I really liked watching it.
Excellent. Did you say, I'm so sorry, I can't remember if you said this. Was this the longest running one-woman show on Broadway?
I believe it is.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that's another incredible thing about it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. It's it's a captivating performance, and it's just so impressive.
Yeah, she's so ridiculously talented.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's great. Blah blah.
I'm bored because she's so great.
She is great. No, I know. every time I see her, I'm like, hey, I haven't seen her in a while. So, you know. Well, that's cool, man.
Yeah.
Well, why don't we move on to, you guys want to talk about Flawless or My Polish Honeymoon?
Ooh, which
My
one to
Polish
talk about?
Honeymoon first. I think we should talk about it. Because Flawless, I don't know. I have
Is it
probably-
flawed?
Or is it? No.
No.
Flawless is amazing.
Flawless?
It's not the Robert De Niro, Philip Seymour
No.
Hoffman movie?
No.
Okay.
No.
Sorry.
My Polish Honeymoon is a story about a Parisian couple that goes to Poland for their honeymoon. It's like a weekend getaway, more or less, to go see, their homeland. They're both Polish. They're going to see, sites from, their family's ancestry and to take in all of the history and, they're there to specifically as a remembrance of the Holocaust.
Right. I was going to say,
It's
wasn't
like
it to
I think
commemorate?
I think it's a 70th anniversary of their. I don't know if it's in Poland or if it's in this town specifically of the Jewish people's extermination, but they're going there for a very kind of solemn event as like a weekend getaway as a couple. And I think what's really fascinating about it is seeing their life on this vacation and how they react differently to situations, and they have very complicated thoughts and emotions about all of it, especially as a couple. And, she is much more, I don't want to say religious, but she's more devoted to Judaism and Jewish culture than he is, and he kind of takes a lot of it for granted. And so that leads to, like, I think some really compelling scenes and some disagreements. I mean, they kind of have a major fight, which is kind of a heartbreaking scene.
It is. That fight was so authentic and so well done. It felt so real. It was really incredible, because I find a lot of times in film, fights never feel quite real, or like an actual fight people would have.
Right. It doesn't feel manufactured.
No,
it feels like it
not
comes
at all.
from a real place.
Yeah,
because
very organically. Yeah.
he's just kind of like, I don't even know why we're here. I'm mostly just doing this for you, because like it's his grandfather's village, and and he's like, I don't really want to be here. And she's like, don't you get it? Like, you have this great thing where, like, where you came from. Like, you have this thing. I don't have that. My family was killed, and they don't, and I had my grandmother, and she died when I was 11, and she didn't talk about any of this stuff, so we don't know anything.
I know.
Like, we don't even know the village she's from.
Yeah. That was so sad when she's talking about how she knows nothing, where she can't even go to the town, and she doesn't even know where she was born. Yeah. So
There's
sad.
also a lot of really interesting commentary about Poland and its history with the Holocaust, and very much being in denial about the things that have happened. And like, even from the way when they get there and they go to like I'm putting this in quotes, the Jewish quarter, which is like pretty much there's no Jews around. It's all like other people running the shops and the businesses, and like the touristized version of it. It's like, let's make a buck. They have all these really like racist little Jewish statues that they're selling at the shops, and like you see them, they're picking them up like, ugh, what is this?
And they call it like the Disneyland of the Holocaust or something like
right.
that.
And then like at the same market, there's like Nazi memorabilia being sold there,
what?
and you're just
Yeah.
like,
That's
this
crazy.
is fucking gross. So yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of interesting commentary about that. I mean, even when they get to the village and they have the remembrance, it's like they have it in a cemetery where most of the gravestones have been stolen by some guy who just lives, on the property or whatever. And they're like, oh yeah, he just stole them and won't give them back. So it's like a cemetery that doesn't even have all of its headstones because some selfish prick took them.
But you know what's so interesting about this movie, and everything you're saying is so interesting and fascinating, but describing it, if I hadn't seen the film, I would think this is a very dark and somber film. It's so funny. It's like an incredibly funny, in a dark way, film.
Yes.
And I loved that kind of tonal contrast where it's very funny, but very, dark. And it's a great juxtaposition. And I love how we see the couple react, and like, she's so, neurotic and controlling and very, very much delegates like how the grandparents should, take care of her child, and he's, much more laid back but kind of reluctant. But that feels like that could slip so easily into very gendered stereotypes, and they're much more complex than that. And they have this really kind of lovely relationship, and way with each other, and that I was completely drawn in and wanted to know where they were going and what was going to happen. And
the trip strengthens their relationship. I mean, and it does. So there's, a point of disagreement where like her mother is kind of, painted as, overbearing but also like a nuisance and, like unreliable when she's like trying to tell her mom, like, you got to do all this stuff. And her mom just suddenly shows up on the trip and she's like, Mom, what the hell are you doing here? Like invading this trip basically. And she ends up having these like really great moments with her mother. And her mother comes because she found her grandmother's birth certificate. And so she found the town that she was from. And so they go there and they have this really moving scene where they go to the spot where her house was and there's no house there anymore. It's just a vacant lot among a neighborhood which has houses on all sides of it, which speaks to like the erasure of her, family's history. But they have this really like beautiful moment together in the vacant lot where they're standing there imagining what her life was like, what the house was. And it really forges a strong bond between them. So it's kind of like reinforcing for the mother-daughter relationship and the husband-wife relationship. And there's this like really kind of lovely moment at the end where I wish they cut it just slightly sooner, but they're all just kind of standing there in the frame of the window and they're, this is really ridiculous subplot, but like she had brought her son's foreskin with them and she was going to bury it in Poland, but then she decided that was not a good idea, so she brought it back. So they buried it in like a house plant that they have out on their like windowsill. So it's like them putting the house plant out there, and you see the whole family like in the frame of the window, and it's just like this really nice, kind of charming moment at the end of the movie.
Yeah,
with
the foreskin.
Yes,
but yeah, that felt like, but with her and her mother in the field or the vacant lot, that felt like such a lovely resolution, and like they finally came together. They finally could understand each other and they could have this kind of healing moment. It felt like such a good conclusion.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. I could have done without the foreskin.
Yeah.
But it kind of fits the
so
film's
could most
humor.
people, I think.
So yeah.
But
how Jewish of you to say. I'm just kidding. We should talk about Flawless though.
Oh my God,
which
yes.
I watched last night and I have to say it's my favorite movie I've seen from the
By the
festival.
way, you're welcome. By the way, you're welcome.
More movies to see?
Yes, you need to see Flawless.
Yes.
Well, you need to see Cop.
Not for the same reason, though.
That's true.
Yeah.
Flawless is actually an amazing film.
Yeah, has really great production value.
The cinematography is exquisite.
The music is so good.
The editing is great. Yeah.
Yeah, it's an Israeli film about a trans teenager. And
I'm intrigued.
So
that's why I wanted to see it.
It's like about that, but it's also about it's also like a commentary on like high school, and like there's this whole bit about asking people to prom and like these overly elaborate, things that kids do to like ask somebody to prom.
Yeah, that
like,
was weird.
The opening is like this kid rides a horse into the school, into the gymnasium to ask this girl.
As a person who knows horses, that's weird.
Yeah, that's a bad idea. So yeah, there's commentary on that, but I mean, it focuses on a trans teenager. Her name is Eden, and it's like about her being a teenager and having to move between schools and like ending up in the situation where she comes into the school and it seems like they accept her pretty much right away. Like,
well, they don't know that she's trans, and that's the thing.
Yeah,
because that's why she had to move from other schools, was because
eventually people find out.
Right,
so she finds these two girls and becomes very friendly with them. And I also love that they're all just kind of catty towards each other. Like all the girls in the movie, like they all like insult each other, including like the quote unquote mean girls of the school. But they also do that with each other.
Right.
And I don't know. It feels so like urgent and like, I don't know. It's just gorgeous. But what is really weird is how it turns into this movie that I was not expecting, which for me was quite nerve-wracking once I realized what was going on.
Oh, yeah. I read the premise, so I knew that's where it was going. So, yeah. So it ends up that the girls are all very obsessed with beauty, as, society is obsessed with, female beauty. And they want to get breast implants.
Or a nose job.
And, right. One of the girls wants to get a nose job.
Or in Eden's case, she wants, surgery.
She wants her top surgery, yeah. So, Yeah, so they decide they're going to sell their kidneys on the black market, essentially.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah, there's a Ukrainian woman who they chat with online who has convinced them.
Ukrainian.
And she's a fucking abusive predator preying on their insecurities and desire for this unrealistic, unattainable standard of beauty. But in Eden's case, it's so heartbreaking because that's what she needs to become herself.
Yeah, sorry, she wasn't. She's in Ukraine, but she's Israeli.
Oh, Karen or Karen.
Karen.
Yes,
yeah.
I was like, I know how to pronounce it.
So she's convinced these girls to sell their kidneys, and I'll give you the money for your surgeries, and you'll get the surgeries. It'll all be like one thing. It'll be smooth, no big deal.
Sure.
And it's just so alarming because you can tell like right away that this woman is kind of like a con artist and is doing this to like tons of other girls clearly. And
absolutely, like right away she tells Eden like, I'm the only one who can help you and your friends can't. Like she's immediately isolating her, which is such an abusive tactic. And I'm like, ooh, she's a creep.
Yeah, and then they get there and it's really scary because Eden's like, no, I think I've changed my mind. And then this woman like insists, and then she walks in, like kicks in the bathroom door and exposes Eden as being trans to the other girls. And
that was so disturbing and unnerving.
And then what's crazy is I keep thinking like, I hope they'll escape, but it's like, no, they actually go through with it and they give their kidneys and they have their surgeries and like they go home, and on the way home on the flight, the girl who has the nose job like passes out because of an infection or something. So they all go to the hospital, and then the police get involved, and everyone finds out at their school that this is what happened to them. Mm-hmm. And shit. I mean,
how long is this movie? Because it sounds like it's 4 hours long.
It's an hour and a half. It's tight, and it comes to a happy resolution, which you're just not expecting.
But it earns that resolution.
Yes,
so much
because they come back and they go through hell.
Right. Well, especially Eden does because she's bullied.
She's outed at this point, too, as being trans.
Everyone's incredibly transphobic to her, including the guy who she had a crush on and kind of...
They went on a date and they kissed.
Right. But, like, he was super nerdy, so she was afraid to, like, declare that she liked him. But anyway, and it's, like, everyone's really horrible to her. And... like trying to take like these guys try to take her pants off and like it's disgusting and horrible. Mm-hmm. But and like her friends initially reject her, but my favorite part of the film is when her friends and she reconcile and they ask her what her real name is, like essentially her dead name, and she's like, Eden, that's my name.
Yeah.
And then the other girl is like, oh, well, when did you realize you were? And she's like, a woman? And she's like, yeah. She's like, when did you realize you were a woman? And she's like, well, I was born a woman. And Eden's like, so was I. And it's so great. And it's like this film is written and directed by a man and a woman. And as far as I know, they're cis. But it's very clear that they got input from a trans person. And I know the actress who plays Eden is a trans actress, which I always want to see trans actors and actresses in the role of trans people. So it's so sensitively done, but so disturbing, but so mesmerizing and beautiful. And it just runs the gamut of emotions.
Mm-hmm. Eden is a boy's name and a girl's name in Hebrew. So I think that works out quite well.
Well, there's also my other favorite scene. That's so funny.
The scene with the father was really good too.
Oh, all the scenes with the father were great. Right. Exactly. And it's so interesting because he's like, oh, I've given you everything, even those stupid hormones. And it's like, clearly he's not supportive. Mm-hmm. But I love that by the end, he's like, I thought that this was a phase that you would get over. And your mother told me, no, this is a phase you need to get over. And I love that. But my favorite scene visually is when Eden is looking in the window with mannequins and like her face is superimposed over a tux, and then the guy Itai, his face is superimposed over a dress, and then they swap. So then she's the proper gender and he's the proper gender. I just loved that. Visually it was incredible and such a reinforcement of gender and fluidity, and it was just great.
This was a really good movie.
So good.
My favorite of the festival for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I've only seen the 2 so far.
Yeah.
So it's my favorite too.
Yeah.
But this is definitely one of the most fascinating films I've seen this year.
Mm-hmm.
So
it's really
so
good.
You've spoiler-pieced me into it.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Nice.
Congratulations.
I hope we've spoiler-pieced everyone into it.
It's
so
really
incredible.
freaking good.
Yeah, it's so good.
Okay. Well, sweet. Well, let's move on to something not so good.
Oh, does that mean
Charlie's
Bangels?
Bangels. Charlie's Bangels. That's right.
Bangels?
Yeah, why not? So, yeah, Charlie's Angels.
That was a thing that happened.
It was a movie.
Yeah.
I mean, what you can say about it is it's a movie.
Is it better or worse than the previous Charlie's Angels movies of the
Megan has
early
not
aughts?
seen them.
Yeah, I haven't seen them, so I can't say.
The first one is pretty ludicrous. I mean, they have some crazy Matrix-style fight with Crispin Glover, if that gives you any indication.
Yeah,
Well,
there's
Crispin
none of
Glover's the
this.
bad guy.
Yeah.
In the first Charlie's Angels movie, which I thought was delightful. But the rest of it is kind of dog shit. And then I don't know if I saw Full Throttle or not. I feel like I did, because I just used to see like every movie. But I don't know. It just like they all fucking blend in. Who needs more Drew
Okay, so
Barrymore?
we don't know whether this is better or worse, but
No.
it sounds not good.
Yeah, no.
Well, it's definitely very tonally different from those.
Mm-hmm.
It leans more. I don't know. It leans. I can't even describe. It's just. Well, tonally, it's all over the place.
It's all over, and it's boring.
Yeah, it's written and directed by Elizabeth Banks, which I was kind of excited about because you know how I feel about Elizabeth Banks, and also because I was like, oh, it'll be cool to see what a woman does with this material.
Right.
And mostly the same things a dude would do with the material, except for there's a lot of positive.
There are
No.
some feminist twists.
Oh, there are
and
lots of
touches, if you will. Yeah.
like right from the opening credits,
Yes.
where you see all the young women doing their thing. The idea being that we are all Charlie's Angels, I guess. I don't know.
Or that girls can do it.
Yeah,
Girl
girls can do
power.
whatever they want to.
Right,
They
exactly.
can write and direct a movie that's not very good.
Listen, I'm not the first person to say this, so this is not my creation, but we will probably achieve gender parity in filmmaking when we have such a surplus of women-directed films that it's not such a knife in the gut when a film is terrible by a woman director.
Sure. When there's just like kind of a mediocre movie, it's like, it's fine.
It's fine.
Yeah.
Exactly. When there's great films, when there's shitty films, and there's mediocre, and it's like, whatever.
Yeah.
That's the day I will be very happy.
Yeah.
So.
I mean, I don't know if anybody be like, it's written and directed by Elizabeth Banks, whatever. I mean, it's just it's just not very good. I mean,
No.
it's slow, which is really
It's weird.
It's weirdly
weird.
slow. It feels like it should be like you're watching it and you'll be like, I feel like this should be moving really quickly, but at
And
the
it's
same
not.
time, it's kind of dead inside.
Right.
That's not good for an action movie.
No, it's not at all. The one thing I will say that the one thing I loved about this film was Kristen Stewart.
Oh, she's great.
Yeah, she's amazing
That is
in
true.
it. She's, I feel like, in a different film. And maybe she's in her
Yeah.
own film in her own mind. I don't know. But she always delivers. I always love her. I'm always excited to see her because she picks such interesting roles and films to work on. And she always brings something interesting to the table. And she's really funny in this and
Yeah.
really charming and good. So, yeah, I wish the rest of the cast and people had been as good as she had been.
Yeah. There's a lot of Jonathan Demme kind of camera work in this too, where her character in particular looks directly at the camera like 3 times.
Yeah, like that's how the film opens
Yeah.
too. She's looking at the camera and talking about how women can do anything.
Right.
And, that's,
And then
kind
she
of
ties up
addressing
a
the
guy
audience.
and beats him up.
Yes.
Which,
Because that's real empowerment.
Yeah. When I can beat the shit out of you, that's when we're at the same level, I guess. I don't know.
Something like that.
But anyway, the thing that's really disappointing about it is that you figure out what the big mystery is. Like, okay, so everybody, you know how Charlie's Angels has Bosley, who's like their runner or
Right.
their boss or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So you got Kristen Stewart, Naomi Scott, who I guess was Jasmine in
Aladdin.
Mm-hmm.
and Ella Balinska, is that her name?
I think so.
Who,
Yes.
who plays Jane, who's very English and very tall, and she beats people up.
And she's supposedly emotionless and whatnot.
So,
But then she cries later, so she does have emotions.
yes, because Kristen Stewart gets beat up pretty bad. Actually, she gets blown up, kind
Yes.
of, but survives.
And then
Anyway,
they're besties.
Then they're besties. So what happens is they do this thing in Rio, and they kick all these guys' asses, and then Patrick Stewart comes in. He's like, "You guys did great, yeah!"
And it's like, yay, Patrick Stewart.
Patrick Stewart is Bosley, woo! And you're like, "Oh, cool, Patrick Stewart is
This is
Bosley."
going to be great.
And then, all the angels leave or whatever, and he's there to clean up the mess. And then they're like, yay, now we're back wherever we are doing our thing, yay. And then Bosley walks in and he's like, "Oh, it's time to retire." Ooh. and everybody you learn is named Bosley. It's like a rank, as Elizabeth Banks' character says later. And is it just me, or was Michael Strahan one of the Bosleys?
He was the New York Bosley.
And he was like very prominent, like the whole time.
He's like center frame.
Yeah.
He's very loud. Yeah, I'm like, what?
Yeah, it was really really bizarre. It took me not that it took a lot of work to take me out of the moment,
Right.
But took me right out of the moment.
And
Very much
people were like, stop trying to make that happen.
Yeah. Stop trying to make fetch happen. Exactly. So anyway, Elizabeth Banks toasts Patrick Stewart with some, I guess it's booze. It's a little bit of the bourbon. And it turns out she slipped him a Mickey. Kinda. It's not like a roofie or anything, but it's like a tracker that's like inside his body. Which by the time they get to the point, which like the next time you see him on screen, he's been given this watch as a parting, like, thank you for being whatever, and he's taken it to some watch guy who's like, "There's nothing in it tracking you. I don't know what the fuck is your problem.
Thank you for being a boss."
Yeah, and so he's got his little wand that detects stuff, his magic wand, we'll call it. And he's hugging Bosley, and it makes his back go like, "Woo, woo." And then that's when Bosley really... And by the way, the moment he shows up on screen for a second time, I didn't know he was in the rest of the movie because, as you know, I don't watch trailers. I don't read the press notes. When he shows up and he's having this watch investigate, I'm like, well, he's the bad guy. Why else would he be having his fucking watch looked at? Christ. They've thrown all these red herrings in about Elizabeth Banks maybe being...
the villain.
That she's the villain.
Yeah.
But no... The moment he, Baldy shows up, you're like, it's him.
Did you just call Pat Stew Baldy?
I did. Well, you call him Pat Stew.
I sure did.
Sir Pat Stew to you.
That's right.
No, just kidding.
So anyway,
Sir Pat Stew.
Naomi Scott has invented this thing that will, I don't remember what it's called.
Callisto.
It's called the fucking Calypso. Let's call it Calypso. It basically makes electricity, it's this little box, and it powers everything, so that you won't need to burn coal or whatever. In theory, a nice idea, but it can also emit an electromagnetic pulse strong enough to kill anybody standing near it.
Okay,
it can
stops pacemakers and shit.
Yeah, exactly.
Causes
Or it makes you can have a
seizures
seizure or whatever. Like the one truly funny moment is when they're like, "Oh, I guess whatever the guys, let's call him Hans, the guard who like gets EMP'd. Oh, I'm sure Hans is okay." And the next scene, he's like, they're covering up his body, But which I knew was coming.
But you didn't think the conversation about Birdman of Alcatraz, Birdman, Batman, Ben
That was
Affleck-
kind of funny.
That was
kind of funny. So that's it. Kristen Stewart's the wisecracking. She's kind of a fuck up, even though
she says she describes herself that way, and she kind of is.
She does have the
mo
"mo money, mo problems" line, which is funny the way she delivers it. And
I mean, what I liked most about her character, and this is not going to come as a surprise if you know me, is she's queer in the film.
Yes.
She checks out a lady, and I'm like, yay! Kristen Stewart's queer in real life. She's queer in the film.
Yeah,
I'm here for that.
yeah. So
not that they explore that, but still, I'm glad that there's a little.
She got a little moment.
Exactly. There's a little something.
Yeah. And then there are a million cameos in the closing credits.
Oh my God! Yes.
There's like Haley Steinfeld shows up, and
Ronda Rousey, Danica Patrick, Laverne Cox, Jacqueline Smith.
Yes, none of the other angels show up. Like Kate Jackson's not there.
I kept expecting them, but it was just.
Well, it would have been
Smith.
nice,
Yeah.
But Farrah Fawcett's no longer with us, so.
Yes, that would make
true.
it hard.
Yeah.
For her.
That would make it hard. But isn't Cheryl
schedule's
Ladd
booked.
still alive?
I think so. I mean, I really don't. I haven't been keeping up with the angels.
Yeah, I'm not tracking them, but yeah.
So,
but yes.
But I mean, to describe the movie, it's just basically an action movie with that plot that I described to you. A bunch of red herrings that aren't really very red. They're washed out. They're faded. I don't know.
like pink.
Yeah, exactly. They put them in with the whites, and they came out pink. And
it's not really an interesting plot. The dialogue is not funny and sharp, and the action scenes, which you'd think you're there for the action choreography, if nothing else, if it's not well written, it's not interesting or suspenseful, at least it's gonna have some great action choreography. No.
It's and it's got this weird. The editing is very strange. It's kind of like a combination of they didn't know what they were doing and they were trying to make the movie shorter.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah,
because
that's a good way to
there
describe
are
it.
some scenes where you're in a fight scene and it's like, oh, we kind of see two bodies here fighting. Like, oh, quick cuts. And then back to like random, you know, wider shot. And then quick cuts, fist, foot, hand, elbow. And like, but not in the kind of like, you know, kind of, you know, cool sort of, I did this on purpose kind of thing.
Not in a rhythmic kind of, you know, energy, synergistic kind of way. No. Yeah. So I hate to say it, but this just really felt like a waste of my time.
Oh, I wasn't going to go that far.
Oh,
I mean, maybe it was a waste of your time.
Yeah.
It got me out of the house, you know.
Well, there's that. No, I know. And I feel terrible. Like, now that I've said that, I feel like incredibly guilty and awful just because I know how hard it is to make a film, and especially for women, and good for Elizabeth Banks for writing and directing this. But yeah, I just wanted this to be better. Wait, and I mean, did this have a tiny budget? Do we know?
I have no idea.
I need to look it up because it felt, for such a big film, arguably, it did not feel like it had a big budget.
It didn't feel like it was very big. Like the special effects were kind of cheesy.
Yeah.
That kind of stuff. So anyway, I don't need to talk more about it. Do you need to talk more about it?
Oh, it had a small budget.
Oh, okay.
48 million.
Well, that makes sense.
Well, 48 million.
So there we go. That's
just
why.
fucking small potatoes.
That is for a
I know. No,
action film. That is.
I understand. No, I'm not. You know, I'm sure that I'm not even going to get into it. So, do you want to talk about The Irishman? Why don't we talk about The Irishman?
I do want to talk about The
Yeah,
Irishman.
why don't you
Let's talk about
lead
it.
us into the Eider Down? I almost said the Eider Down.
Megan, why don't you lead us into The Irishman?
So, The Irishman is Martin Scorsese's latest film with Al Pacino, Robert De Niro,
Starring
Joe
an
Pesci.
Italian as the Irishman.
No, Robert De Niro is Irish. He's half Italian, half Irish.
Robert McDierno.
I just said he's half. Jeez.
All right, sorry.
Anywho, so yeah, and he plays Frank Sheeran,
Yeah.
who is a real person who is
He paints houses.
and which is the novel, or not the novel, but the autobiography or the biography that this
I
is
heard you
based
paint
on.
houses.
Yes, and I love that. It's a great line. But yeah, and he's like a hitman, does jobs here and there for.
It's kind of strange.
mob.
He's a truck driver who works his way up to hitman, and
He
then he
does.
goes beyond hitman.
He sure does.
Except when Joe Pesci's like, "Nah, you're still a hitman."
Has to keep him in his place.
Yeah.
So yeah, and it's all about him and his rise, and also his friendship with Jimmy Hoffa, played by Al Pacino. And
I wish it were someone else.
I 100% wish it were someone else because
I mean, he's so Al Pacino.
He's always Al Pacino. I feel, especially now, and it has been for probably the past
Right.
20 years. But what's interesting, I have to. So that's kind of the broad strokes, and it's a 3.5 hour film. It's very long. What I have to say, I liked this tremendously, and it starts off in a nursing home, and Robert De Niro is in a nursing home, and I'm like, oh, this is kind of interesting for a mob film. We're gonna see someone old and not dead, and it goes along, and then it's all flashbacks, and he's telling the story, and you don't know who he's telling the story to, and it's feeling kind of formulaic, like a regular mob film, and I'm like, okay, it's going along, and then. And there's something that happens that I want to talk about, but when you get to the last half hour of the film, I have been absolutely haunted by the last half hour because I think it is so brilliantly done, and you realize it's a very different film. It's a film about time, and it's a film about regret and the futility of legacy and the fragility of time, and it's also about, interestingly, the ramifications of toxic masculinity. Because there's this really fantastic scene, I found it fantastic, where Robert De Niro's daughter, who's like 10 or 11, had an altercation with a grocer. And he finds out and he's like, what? We're going. And he like takes her by the hand and walks to the grocer, the small grocery store, and there's this great long shot where his daughter is standing outside watching, and through the window you see Robert De Niro beating the shit out of this guy, and like
eventually throws him through the glass
through
doors.
the glass, right? And he's like, then he breaks his hand and he stands on it, and the guy is like begging for him to stop, and he won't stop. And rather than being seduced by violence or thinking like, oh, isn't this great? Or, oh, my father protected me. She is absolutely repelled.
She's
and
the anti-Karen.
100%. She is scared of him after that. And we keep seeing her periodically throughout the film, and she doesn't want to go near him. She doesn't want to go near Joe Pesci. And then when she's an adult, she's played by Anna Paquin, and she is almost silent throughout the whole film, except for one line.
Why haven't you called Joe?
Why haven't you called Joe, Jimmy Hoffa's wife? And it's interesting because a friend of ours asked, oh, weren't you annoyed that she doesn't have any lines? And I'm like, no. I said it was incredibly intentional.
Yeah.
She's like the silent specter, judging him and being his conscience and reminding him, like, what the fuck are you doing? What are you doing this for? And there's also this heartbreaking scene towards the end of the film where he's waiting. He's on crutches. He's waiting in line at the bank. And you're like, oh, what's he doing? And then he's waiting for a teller, and he lets somebody go ahead of him. And then he starts to walk up to the teller window, and you see Anna Paquin, and she puts her close sign up because she won't have anything to do with him anymore, and she won't talk to him. And he's like calling to her, and he's like, I just want to talk to you. And it's so heartbreaking. But he's also a douche, and you know why she won't talk to him.
He's also a douche.
He's also a douche. So it's totally understandable. So it's so interesting because I feel like so many. Well, I want to hear, Dave, your thoughts. I have more thoughts too, but I want to hear what you think.
Well, everybody is talking about this movie like it was, made by Jesus and.
I don't think it's made by Jesus.
Blessed by, his holiness and, shat upon by the Holy Ghost. I don't know. I can't, I've run out of metaphors.
Catholic metaphor is very appropriate.
Yeah,
for an Irish film.
it's like, I mean, I need to see it again because I need to see it again because it's 3.5 hours long. And I don't think that you can take a movie this epic in scope, I mean, Charlie's Angels wishes it had this budget, a movie this epic in scope and kind of parse it out after one viewing, I think. But I did like it. Mm-hmm. I did want to see it again. I'm not sure how I feel about it in the canon that is Scorsese, or... Mm-hmm. I'm not sure that I thought it was Robert De Niro's best performance. There are scenes when he is transcendent.
I completely agree. Like once he finds out he has to take care of Jimmy Hoffa and like the camera lingering on his face.
Oh, that scene in the like when they're alone in the Howard Johnson diner?
When they're alone in the Howard Johnson diner, when he's alone on the plane and he's like contemplating everything. It's absolutely stunning. Like the work he's doing in those scenes is absolutely incredible.
But I think a big part of the problem for me is like the entire time I'm watching this movie, it's like, when is Al Pacino going to come on and be Al Pacino as Jimmy Hoffa? Mm-hmm. And the thing that's really kind of disappointing about his performance is you can tell that Pacino's actually trying in this because he does the accent a lot. Yeah. I mean, Jimmy Hoffa had that Midwestern, accent. And he does that most of the time, but he still slips out of it every once in a while. And, that happens to like Robin Hood, Prince of Surfers with Kevin Costner. It happened to him.
Ooh, well, that's an egregious example.
I know. I was making a point.
Yes,
that it happens to everybody, especially people who can't act very well, like Kevin Costner. But anyway, so there's that. This is really strange. I loved Joe Pesci in this movie.
He's great.
But the entire time I was watching it, I was like, Joe Pesci's in a movie again. I just couldn't get into it. It's like you've got these iconic figures. And the other thing was like the face, the de-aging was really not working for me.
Well, that's what's so interesting is that's what they blew the budget on was all the de-aging and aging, backwards and forwards. And I'm watching it and I'm like, in the beginning, I'm like, wow, Robert De Niro's face just looks weird.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what's going on? And it's because he's supposed to be 25.
Yeah.
And he does not look 25.
No, he looks like a guy who's, had a bunch of computers brush his face. Mm-hmm.
So later on it works better.
It works better when they're older.
Yes, very much so. But when they're younger.
Yeah. And the other thing is Al Pacino also walks like Al Pacino. He's got that stoop-shouldered, like head forward kind of thing. Mm-hmm. You can see it all the way back in like Serpico, over your closet door there. but it's just become
Superco's watching me.
Yeah, it's just become more pronounced over time. But I mean, but when the movie does work, it works. It works so well. Like the last shot of the movie.
Oh my God!
I just like almost broke into tears.
I did break into tears.
Yeah.
The last shot is gorgeous. The stunning.
The final shot of the movie is De Niro at his nursing home, basically getting ready to die,
all alone. And
he says to the nurse, "Can you just leave?" Or is it the priest?
It's the priest.
The priest. He says to the priest, "Can you just leave the door open a little bit, Father? I just like to have it a little bit open." And then it cuts out into the hallway, looking back into the room, and just the door is open this much. I've got my hands about a foot apart, and you can just see De Niro alone in his wheelchair, and then it just goes to black.
But
and it's like
right, and the way he's like framed in the door,
yeah.
like he's so boxed in. And, it's incredible. It's incredible visually. It's incredible thematically. But I thought also the scene right before that is really interesting with the nurse played by Dasha Palasko, where she's looking at the photos he's looking at, and there's a photo of Al Pacino as Jimmy Hoffa with his daughter, and she's like, "Oh, who's that with your daughter?" And he's like, "You don't know who that is?" And she's like, "No, who's that?" And you realize the fragility of time, and that it, like, what the fuck were they doing all this shit for? It doesn't matter.
Yeah,
and that's the whole point of the film, is that it just doesn't matter.
A figure as monumental as Jimmy Hoffa, nobody of this era knows who he is.
Yeah,
they
might know his body's missing,
or or according to this movie, just cremated.
Very true. Very true. But yeah, I mean, I know what you're saying like how everyone's thinking like, oh, it's the second coming of Jesus with this film. And yeah, I mean, this is not my favorite film of the year by any means, but I did like it tremendously, like I said. But I have to say, I'm very, looking at Scorsese's oeuvre, I'm very up and down with his films. Like, I either love them or I cannot stand them. And for me, my favorite films tend to not be the mob films, except for Goodfellas, which is brilliant. But what I always feel like Scorsese doesn't, for me, what doesn't quite work is that it seems like he has the intention of condemning, certain hedonistic lifestyles, but then ends up just celebrating them because he understands very well why they're so appealing and seductive and alluring.
Right.
And this film feels so much more introspective and emotionally mature and thoughtful, where he's still showing all of that, but it really truly feels like, wow, there's some really horrific consequences to this life in a way I've never really seen him do, aside from, I'm going to say it, aside from perhaps Age of Innocence, which I love. It's probably my favorite film of his. And it's such an incredible, heartbreaking meditation on regret. And I feel like that's what he does so well in this film, is regret. And it's just, I think it's incredibly well done.
I'm with you on that. Although I will say my favorite scene was the argument about you people.
Oh, that's great. So the guy who is arguing that,
Tony Pro.
Yeah. He is amazing on Boardwalk Empire as Al Capone.
Yeah.
I love him.
Yeah.
So I'm so glad to see him in this.
Yeah, he was really cool. Jimmy Hoffa has, he's been in prison. He's no longer the president of the union. He wants to be the president of the union again. He's got to get the blessing of this guy named Tony Pro, who's kind of become the mob muscle behind the union president. So De Niro and Pacino as their as Hoffa and the Irishman, they go there to make peace with Tony Pro and his bodyguard. And when they were in prison, Al Pacino said to Tony Pro or whatever, Al Capone from Boardwalk Empire, he called him "you people," meaning you Italians. And it's just, and the guy's never gotten over it. He beats the shit out of him in prison. And then he like, it ends up being them throwing punches in this scene. But I cannot describe to you like the 7 minutes of them just dancing around the fact that this is what they both really want to talk about, and then finally getting to it. And then you have Tony Pro's guy, and then Robert De Niro just being like, "Oh Jesus, here we go again!" Like this, just kind of like smack the forehead kind of moment with the two of them, like this again, Jesus. It's so funny.
Yeah, no, that scene was great. It was incredibly well shot and well done. And it's funny, for such a long film, there are moments like that just feel so well paced. And that, even though it's such a long scene, it felt great. It flew by, and it was so interesting and funny. Yeah, it was really
all
funny.
all the scenes with with Joe Pesci felt really great.
Yes, Joe Pesci's amazing.
And he's a very understated Joe Pesci.
That's the best kind.
There's no yelling. There's nothing. Everything with his character is kind of done with his eyes, really.
Very much so. Very subtle.
And he's very, he doesn't raise his voice. He doesn't get, even when he gets angry, he's, he's quiet. So for people who are only used to him maybe either being 8 heads in a duffel bag or being, Tommy from Goodfellas, it's like, it's a very different sort of role. Although, I mean, he's a very diverse actor. So
I mean, I liked him in Class with Brendan Fraser.
Wait, are you talking about With Honors?
Yeah, With Honors.
I was
like,
what?
Not Class. That's a different movie.
Class, that's the one with Rob Lowe and Andrew McCarthy.
Yes.
I was like, With Honors. I love him in With Honors.
Yeah.
He's great in that.
So anyway, it has really powerful moments. The whole thing where they are going to kill Hoffa, that whole thing is very tense. It really works.
Incredibly tense. Yeah.
De Niro really, really carries that very well. His demeanor, his everything. But it's just, I don't want to say that his performance is hit or miss, because Robert De Niro is rarely not good. There are movies where you're just like, I don't know if you were the right person for this role.
Or he seems like he's just phoned it in.
Totally.
This he's not.
He's completely committed, but unfortunately, I think the combination of the de-aging and just some things like that, it didn't quite work for me as well as it could have. But I mean, that's tough when you've got the same actors playing, 50 years of character.
Yeah. Yes.
That
I think that was kind of a misstep, but other than that, I think De Niro's performance is incredible in this. I have always been astounded by his, and it's funny talking about Joe Pesci giving such a subtle performance, because I've always been astounded by Robert De Niro's capacity for subtlety, where just everything is conveyed in his eyes. Like I think of Godfather Part 2, that's done so, he does that so well in that, and I feel like in most of his films, he does that incredibly well. And he does it so well here too. Like, you see his regret, you see his pain, you see his conflicted loyalties when Pesci asks him, like, you got to take care of, Jimmy. And it's like, he's friends with both of them. What do you do? And so.
I mean, Hoffa's just given him this big award for the Teamsters. It's like, I wouldn't want to be Frank Sheeran staring down the barrel of that gun.
No.
So anyway, it's worth seeing. I mean, I don't know.
Sounds like it.
Absolutely.
It comes out here in Boston today, the day the podcast comes out, Friday, November 15th. It'll be on Netflix, I think, the 27th.
Yes.
So right in time for your X-Giving. So, it's definitely worth seeing. Is it 3.5 hours good? I don't know. At the same time, I'm not sure what I'd take out.
It's funny that you're saying that, because I kept thinking that, like, this movie's too long, but I don't know what I would remove.
Right.
Yeah, because there are so many great scenes.
In fact, I would have put in even more Harvey Keitel. So.
Oh yeah, Harvey Keitel's great.
But that's all I have for it. Do you have anything else for it there, Megan?
I think that's gonna do it for me too.
Awesome.
All right. Well then, we should wrap up this here episode of Spoilerpiece Theater.
We should.
Woo-hoo!
Yes.
Let's do it. Let's wrap it.
Okay.
Put a bow on top.
So the podcast is the kind of podcast you can find wherever you can find podcasts. Hey. And if you wanted to get in touch with the show, you can do that in all kinds of ways. But I will say this first. Please, the place where you get your podcast, rate us. Give us your very highest rating, because, of course, we're amazing. And
we just got a very nice plug, actually.
Oh, did we?
By somebody on Twitter. Brendan Agnew gave us a really nice plug to Podchaser, saying that we were a really good show.
Oh,
so really
thank
nice.
you very much. That's very cool.
Thank you, Brendan.
And we'll talk about you, which maybe you want, maybe you don't. I don't know. You did it on social media, so obviously you want. Anyway, if you wanted to get in touch with us on the show, you can tweet at us, which is at Spoilerpiece. You can email us, spoilerpiece@gmail.com. You can go to the website, spoilerpiece.com, or you can give us a call.
862-21-PEACE.
Leave us a voicemail, and if it's totally awesome, we'll put it on the show. A lot of times when they come in, I forget to put them on the show, so I don't really have a good memory, so I apologize, listeners. That's why I always talk about actors by their real names as opposed to their characters' names.
Because the character names you forget.
Yeah.
At least I know I do a lot of times.
But anyway, that's the show. Thank you very much. Please sign up for our Patreon. There's exclusive audio. We're talking about the movie Cop this week. This very strange James Woods movie from the late 80s, based on a James Ellroy novel. And my name is Dave Riedel. I write for Salt Lake City Weekly, Orlando Weekly. I'm a member of BAFCA. You can find me on Twitter, Letterboxd, and Instagram as Dave Sees Movies.
I'm Megan Kearns. I'm a freelance writer and critic, editor of Bitchflix, and also a member of BAFCA. And you can find me on Twitter at Opinioness World.
My name is Evan Crean. I'm editor for The Independent. I am co-chair of BAFCA and co-author of your 80s Movie Guide to Better Living. And you can follow me on Twitter and on Letterboxd as Real Recon.
And we'll see you next week.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.